So, we believe in the power of words at Gemini Ink, and in the magic and impact that can wield in our lives and communities, as well as in being accountable for the impact of those words. And I can't imagine a better example of the magical power of words than the literary voice and creations of Ire'ne Lara Silva. We are thrilled to be honoring her tonight as our 2023 Texas State Poet Laureate, and as the literary leader that she is. It is also our pleasure to have with us in the evening 3 other wonderful South Texas poets, Octavio Quintanilla, Yanez-Alaniz, and Gume Laurel, and we can't wait to hear from these poets. We are so happy you've joined us for this night of celebration. Enjoy. So you are going to hear from all 4 poets on this stage, and then we're going to do some Q&A with Ire'ne, and then at 8 o'clock we will end the program with a book signing. Okay? Awesome. So the first poet who's reading tonight, Gume Laurel, is a Texan native to the Rio Grande Valley on the southernmost border. For the past decade, he has dedicated himself to crafting literary works that promote inclusion and showcase diverse characters with intersectional identities. The bulk of Gume's writings are focused on underrepresented groups, especially those from the communities he's a part of, Latin and queer. His writings include poetry and young adult fiction of various genres. When he isn't writing, Gume can be found getting lost on a hiking trail with his dogs Blue and Mouse.
So they left it to me. It's actually a roast tonight. We're gonna roast you again. But it's really cool to be here with you guys. I'm gonna read a couple poems from my poetry book that's gonna be releasing in should be February, early next year. It's called Assimilated Natives. It's a book of borderland poetry specific to those of us who are from the borderlands, in the Rio Grande Valley, who over generations we've been there. So, you know, we're like 3rd, 4th generation, and how every generation has met some form of, you know, has had to deal with some type of battle within America that's caused us to lose a little bit of our identity. So for example, our generation is the border wall. My grandparents, great-grandparents, the Mexican lynchings, my parents and grandparents, segregation. And so how that kind of drives us further and further away from who we are, and that confusing kind of gray area space where it leaves us, we're not Mexican enough, we're not American enough, who are we? And as those of us from the borderland, we are like this hybrid, essentially. So the first poem I'm going to read from that book is called Heart of Rose Gold. I have a heart of rose gold. A boy like me is not a dime a dozen. I've been told that floral arrangements serve as prayers to those in hospital beds and those who have managed another year. So I make sure to keep my vase filled to the brim with holy water. Tears from saints with thorn-pricked thumbs, years spent away from home stay fresh in my mind. The alleys behind bars, faces I will never put names to. A stranger once told me that I am on a different frequency. I think maybe that's why nobody is ever tuning in when I speak. I light a candle in hopes that someone will turn the dial on the radio so that they can jam out with me. But then I remember it's flowers that do the trick, so I walk through a meadow that was once a forest, remind myself how every empty place used to be full. I prove that this theory is a two-sided coin when I fill my palm with little pink flowers, the kind that grow wildly in Texas, except I tame them with a pinch and a pluck, and I wrangle them with a lasso bow to magic trick them into a bouquet. I leave them in the place where I first learned to tie my shoes, in the same cemetery where, whenever I visit home, I leave flowers for strangers who were not always strangers. This rose gold heart, my prayer, when I hope someone is tuning in to hear, while into the vase I offer another tear. Make sure to keep on time, because I was trying to think of which book, poems to read out of that book, and it's actually Anel through poetry. It was pre-pandemic. You had thrown a really big queer poetry reading, and that's where I first met Ire'ne, and she was there timing everybody. So everybody, because there was like 30 of us that had to read within 2 hours, so everybody had 5 minutes, and Ire'ne was just there with the timer, just like ready to like call in, like to get off the stage. So I was just like terrified of her the whole night, like watching the crowd. So I was like, perfect, I'll read the poem I read that night. Again, another one from Assimilated Natives. This one is called Little Joto. Little Joto, dancing on the border. Us queens never looked so razzle-dazzle, sugar plum berry fly, swaying from one side to the other, trying to balance the tender and machismo in you. So they don't give you too much shit when they notice that your arms are a heroic. You won't like me when I'm angry, shade of muscle green when it comes to giving hugs, but limpideo when it comes to throwing the ball. Legs that might not be able to kick the ball far, but can kick your feet high as the stars spackle, sparkle, twinkling as you dance on the border of your two halves, but neither is your true homeland. Bake a cake with your tia's recipe that calls for silk, sweet sugar, and a velvet touch, but leave it in the oven, let it char, and to big boys don't cry tar. Spend time in a fragrant garden watered by your tio's thumb, kissing the manguera into a fountain, but stomp on the flowers on the way out, out and in, stomped all over. You have been made to be the beat down, burnt out doormat to everyone who refuses to accept your jazzy sparkle, who refuses to comprehend your folkloric flair, applauds their own toxic, poorly disguises. I know what's best, this is for your own good, ignorance. You have not seen your hours of practice, your bleeding toes, your broken bones, yet you keep practicing, you keep going. The show must go on, dancing like all the chismosas are watching, pero you know what? You don't got a single fuck left to give on the border of your two halves. You have your mother's rose petal lips and your father's summer noonday eyes. Blow kisses to the critics, and when they raise their hand to push you down, make them see your fiery gaze and regret the thought of boxing you in, convincing you to be restricted to one plot of land or the other, because neither is your true land. You belong in the divide, the merging of sides. The border is your stage where you will dazzle to onlookers who came for a show. Give them a show, the performance of your life. This is your life, a balancing act on the border of your two halves. Okay, so I got time for one more. I was like making sure. I don't want to get yelled at.
Also mention mouthfeel. Mention mouthfeel.
Oh yes, so that book, like I had mentioned, Assimilated Natives, it's published by Mouthfeel Press out of El Paso. They're a borderland press, so if you're familiar with them, they're amazing, they're great. So make sure to check it out. It'll be in February. And then also, I'm going to be having next year 2 books publishing through West 44. They're an imprint of Rosin Publishing, 2 verse novels. The first one is I can't talk about the second one because it's still top secret. I just signed a contract on it. But the first one is it's going to be out in January. It's a queer retelling of Samson and Delilah, retold as a gay teen love story between a football player and a marching band kid in modern day Texas during Friday Night Lights season. It's called Sin. So it's Texan as Texan as gets. Like they get one burger after they get Rostas, it's like as valley as it gets. It's like, they're super like watcha about it. But yeah, that one's gonna be out in January, so make sure to keep an eye out for that one. I don't have any books because they're all basically going through a rebrand right now. So make sure to follow me on Instagram, tx.author, and I post all kinds on there, so just make sure to keep an eye out there. One more poem I'm going to read out of the book. I feel like it's been very frustrating living in Texas because it feels like our governor and everybody just like doesn't care about us, and so it's very frustrating to live here. So I've been lately having to really think like, okay, so what is it that really keeps me here? What is it? And there is just so much beauty in our state that despite everything going on, there's so much, there is so much beauty here. And this poem is from a time when I went to Marfa, Texas. And it was like a whole thing. And a lot of this is literal. Everyone's like, oh, what does this mean? Like, no, I was literally like doing some stupid stuff. driving 6 hours west. Texas evolving, flat, hilly, mountainous the farther we get. Cloudy dirt roads, periwinkle skies, choosing the safest hiking trail, unexpectedly clawing up to the highest peak, howling like wolves off the ledge, howls stampeding across the rugged desert landscape, howls barreling back into our drummer boy chests, bum corazones, inspired by magic where magic had lost its voice. A solo yellow butterfly, yellow everything, yellow everywhere, bubblegum hair, champagne sunsets, red wine every night, splintered fingers, glitter green nail polish, cracking wood into pieces, crumpling pages torn from a journal, lighters on their last breath, campfires, devouring the previous year behind us, walking into an open range and asking where to next, fading teeth marks on shoulders, branding into purple scars, erasing purple scars by letting go of what I shouldn't hold on to, watching kites fly, higher than the stars. I am the kite, but I am no longer stuck in the past, so I make the nighttime sky skip ahead a few beats, consider myself moving forward, gliding into the future, tethered to wind, with promise for tomorrow, wind taking me from one place to the next, air that does not know how to make me feel let down, air I can finally breathe again.
Okay, here we go. Thank you, Gume. And Gume did mention Mouthfilled Press, who, plug, is one, Maria Maloney, who was the founder of Mouthfilled Press, will be with us in September teaching a class on starting up your own publishing business. So you might want to check it out. All right. Our next reader coming to the stage is Jen Yanez-Alaniz. Jen is a Chicana mestiza activist, educator, poet, and PhD fellow in culture, literacy, and language at the University of Texas, San Antonio. Her poetry can be read in various journals and anthologies. She is the author of an extensive critical biography of Carmen Tafoya, published in the forthcoming anthology Chicana Portraits. Her debut poetry chapbook, Surrogate Eater, was published by Alabrava Press in 2023.
It's a little tiny bit awkward, but I'm gonna do. Okay, so before I start reading from Surrogate Eater, I wrote a love poem. Who are we, if not two who love? If not two whose bodies carry the gravity of loss, even in the most unassuming parts of us, in that soft web where our hands stretch to grasp, in the bend of our skin where we hold our unrest, right here, in this space where our breasts heave, declaration, revolution, in the stream of our words, declaring healing in our strength. We mend in our communal unfolding, in our willingness and in our want for restoration. Glory exists beyond the most insurmountable moments of injury, beyond the disintegrating woman you wrote of as a remedy for your pain, for my pain, for our pain. Glory exists. I feel it when you speak. I feel the soft silk of your voice, a gentle finish undulating across my nettled edges. I believe that a poet's promise is a kiss, where heaviness lifts without resistance, where words return me to gentle wonder, where words stream the silk horizon of your voice. Though grief persists, exists love, exists love, exists love, exists poet. jump right into like some of the most challenging of the poetry. So in the grand scheme of the poems in Surrogate Eater, they speak of transformative spaces of being in recovery of eating disorder, of generational trauma of eating disorder, and sort of the things that come along with it. Running, invasive memory. I know of sin and shame, the obligation of silence in my body, the red ribboning loom of womanhood, proem to my suffering. I am beatified by Mother Mary as I run. Holy, obedient girl of intact hymen, I pray for the licentious lust of Mary Magdalene. I want the hunger of a woman abandoned for fucking, the dishonor of breasts, and disgrace of thickening clitoris. I want to suspend the red ribboning loom of my womanhood, of sin, and my sex. I run miles to reach my bones, my ribs, my altar. Into the rise. We love with no marriage, with no document. We open ourselves wide upon the offing, unsanctified waters. A viscous cathedral pulses within us, urgent with prayer. Veiled and visceral, the unclaimed land within me reaches. I swell into the rise, utter the psalm sung within the bloom, utter the psalm beyond the skin I offer. Our country exists only between us. My body at the table. A stream of hot water, a night for a singe, a smudging of skin. I bite down on the sweet taste of fire, fingers clutch in pleading supplication. The stream leaves streaks down my stomach, scarlet sashes ribbon down my legs, soothe across the scars on my knees, ancient burial grounds of unanswered prayers. I lay across the floor, limbs limp and splayed, my skin a soft linen. A rose arches from the center of my body, each lover at the tips of my fingers. I breathe shallow breaths of ache, breaths rise toward God. Sweet contrition, sweet contrition. I rest in the charity of my sin, relief from the pain, pink pills in a cup. My lovers, they reach, each takes from the flesh, my body at the table. The comfort of a purge, hereditary. It's easy to consider in a daily routine the importance of keeping or letting go by order of calories and texture. I mark my disdain by the size of my waist, constricting in myself what I cannot tolerate. I strain my self-hate, the shame of my breasts, the milk I made, the fat that consumes my son and his starvation. I pour it all into a 1-gallon bag and seal it. So that poem is particularly important because while I was positive that I was having a very open dialogue with my daughter and being careful not to shame her body in any way, I didn't do the same for my sons. And so consensually, one of my sons has given me permission to say that, yeah, definitely, he is in the throes of an eating disorder. So watch your sons. So I'm going to read one more poem. It's not from Surrogate Eater. It's from a forthcoming anthology that is also going to be published by Mouthfeel. The Corazon Collective is made up of Ire'ne Lara Silva, Joe Reyes Boitel, Angelina Sainz from California, and Carmen Calatayud. And me, of course. And so, and by the way, Surrogate Eater is published by Alabrava Press. Octavio, the most amazing publisher and editor, I might say. And he tells me, he reminds me, he's not my publicist, but he's been pretty awesome putting my name out there and helping me get the book out. So thanks a lot, Octavio. I really appreciate it. Muse. I get close enough for you to touch my dress, the lavender hue of cotton. I witness the birds fuss, swoop, and squawk, satisfied to hover. Those birds they peck, their beaks they take of your flesh, devour verses meant for me, the Magdalene standing by wanting. My lids and limbs heavy, feeling the need growing. Carefully, I merely skim your skin, the smooth tone, strength honed by verse and vigor, the stirring from under your soft cotton shirt. I, an aging woman desperate, strain and ache in the ovaries, tightness in the uterus, breast tender with a need to nourish, my body wanting to receive into that space where motherhood is born. The Magdalene from within me escapes. I am left to hold the host, to sip the wine. I leave you at the tomb. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have 2 seats up front if anybody needs a seat. Come on up. All right. Octavio Quintanilla is the author of the poetry collection If I Go Missing, the founder and director of the Literature and Arts Festival Verso Frontera, publisher of Alabrava Press, and former 2018 through 2020 Poet Laureate of San Antonio. His frontextos, or visual poems, have been published and exhibited widely. His new poetry collection, The Book of Wounded Sparrows, is forthcoming from Texas Review Press in fall 2024. He teaches literature and creative writing at Our Lady of the Lake University. Please welcome Octavio.
Testing.
It'll take it a minute, so hold down the button.
I know why you gotta be difficult, mira.
Testing. Okay, I'm not gonna give a lot of context to the poems. Just know that I'm gonna read 5 poems and they all, in a way, give you an idea of the types of themes that I'm working with. And I just want to thank Ire'ne and congrats on being the Texas Poet Laureate. And also I wanna thank some of my students are here from Olu, so thank you for coming. So the first poem is called, oh yeah, by the way, can you please hold your applause until I finish reading? Thank you. The first poem is called The Poetics of Separation, a micro essay. Poetry remembers that distance can be made of suffering. Distance between blood cells, between two words on this page, between a mother and a son. And so I carry distance. I carry the distance of my past like a bag full of dirt. But I can't make words grow out of it and write what I can't remember. What is the Spanish word for water? What is the Spanish word for longing? What is the Spanish word for failure? My relationship with language is absence. One I can't shape with my hands, not like clay or fire. I try, and for this trying, I rely on what my body thinks it knows. I allow it to speak to that part of me for which I'll never have words. This poem doesn't want to tell you a story that you can follow. It wants to take you to a river, blindfold you, lower you into its veins. Hombres. The fields vibrating with buckshot, evening like a horsetail, trailing the light's dim promise. My uncle brings home the half-open mouth of a white-tailed deer. The rest of its body follows, antlers heavy like a wooden cross. I am small, press myself against my father's legs, the massive animal on the table. Someone built sturdy for times like these. Under the light bulb, gently swaying in the humid air, the men drink beer and point to the only star willing to testify on their behalf. I'm curious about that, but I've never seen the meadows where the grown men go. Never alone to road wilderness all over my arms and chest. Staring into the buck's dead eyes, I know I will be alone one day, in a field all a-tremble with evening. The dying lights bristle against my face, the torsos of the men who love me, laced with the earth's skin. In my mouth, the mouth of my daughter. In her mouth, the mouth of my son. In his mouth, my mother's prayer. In the mouth of the prayer, the nightingale my father brought back to life with his breath. In my mouth, the mouth of my youth. In its mouth, the empty mouth of money. In my mouth, something other than my mouth. My daughter's hair becoming one with the dark. My son's voice calling my name. This was called Broken Names Like Broken Mirrors. Like a window, the first letter of my name opens inside the mouth of a lover I had to give up because she said I didn't have the answers she wanted. How to make her understand that there are no true answers, and too many poems written about the names given to us by those who claim to love us. My name on a passport, my name on a job application, my name tattooed on the softest part of her wrist. Some nights, I think she could have been anyone's lover, and I'll still forgive her, save anyone who in some way looked like me. My hair, my eyes, the color of my skin. Not that, please. Everything else, yes. even this loneliness that she could never touch. And touching someone else now, I feel I'm still touching her with it, which is to say, she's nothing but an obscure reference in a poem now, dark like the sound of rain. This is my last poem. It's a little bit longer, and it's some of you probably heard it before. Has anybody seen the movie Blood In, Blood Out? Well, it's called Poem About Not Dying, with references to the movie Blood In, Blood Out. It's hard to write a funny poem about a movie where a young boy dies with a needle in his arm, in a city where vatos locos forever means that you're on the clock, bitch, and midnight is coming. That's from the movie. Where it means that no one gets to truly raise a family, and all the family you have could backstab you when you least expect it, or will die for you, because this is the only way they can show their love. But love is everywhere, just like in every neighborhood, in every barrio, there must be a pine tree waiting for us to return. It doesn't have to be a pine tree. Any tree would do, but one on which one of our working class forefathers, just before the horizon swelled with twilight, carved their initials with a pocket knife right in its heart's center. For months now, I watched the same movies over and over till I memorized the lines the dying speak just before they close their eyes forever in a make-believe world that sometimes spills into my dreams. Dreams where I'm driving fast and reckless like a gallo negro, and my immigrant father dying in the back seat, asking for a drink of water. His last, he says, before he closes his eyes to this earth and opens them to see a new world where everyone is a stranger. And words are birds whose flight no one understands. Next time you see birds, think of them as words we never say to each other, like, I miss you, and I love you, and don't go. See the sky speak with birds all along the dirt roads where we try to leave a trace of who we are, and hear them speak along grain fields that brighten against the long horizon like low flames, or like the small fire a gun spits out of its mouth into the air to remind us that it's just a movie, that no one dies here, and we all go home. Thank you.
Thank you, Octavio. And so now, for the person that we are all here to see and celebrate, y'all, I am very excited to introduce this next writer. Ire'ne Lara Silva, the 2023 Texas State Poet Laureate. Is the author of 4 poetry collections: Furia, Blood Sugar Canto, CUICACALLI, House of Song, and FirstPoems, 2 chapbooks, Enduring Azucares and Hibiscus Tacos, and a short story collection, Flesh to Bone, which won the Premio Aztlán. Ire'ne is the recipient of the 2021 Tasajillo Writers Grant, a 2017 NALAC Fund for the Arts Grant, the final Alfredo Cisneros de Moral Award, and was the Fiction Finalist for AROHO's 2013 Gift of Freedom Award. Most recently, Ire'ne was awarded the 2021 Texas Institute of Letters Shrake Award for Best Short Nonfiction. Ire'ne is currently a writer-at-large for Texas Highways magazine and is working on a second collection of short stories titled The Light of Your Body. A new poetry collection, The Eaters of Flowers, is forthcoming from Saddle Road Press in January 2024. Please welcome Ire'ne.
for that wonderful intro, and thank all of you for being here. It's really hot. I don't ever want to go anywhere outside. So I understand the sacrifice to get in traffic and show up here while it was still so bloody hot. So thank you all for being here with us. Thank you to Gemini Ink for wanting to host this. Thank you to Gume and Jen and Octavio for accepting my invitation to be here tonight. I wanted to celebrate with them, and such incredible poems. I was really happy to hear them. What else do I have to say? The other thing I wanted to say is that it has been a really beautiful thing to be named Texas State Poet Laureate. I was kind of like ambitious for it and I wanted it. I've been on a short list for many years. But I think what surprised me more than being named it was how much happiness and joy people reacted to the news with. Like you hope people like you hope that, I always tell people, like, my thing is that I always want to come into rooms with writers and poets and readers, and I want to see friends. I don't want to see enemies and like be like, that person is my nemesis. No, that person's not my nemesis. But the whole point of this is not to compete. The whole point of this is for all of us to speak and to share and to feel and be there for each other and create community that way. And so it's been really beautiful to have that be part of this Poet Laureate experience, to just feel that other people are happy too. And I'm happy to share that. So just to be contrary, I'm going to start by reading a not poem. I have this short story collection that I finished, and actually I'm very happy. I just got this last night. It has the very last story, the 13th story that I wrote for the short story collection. But I'm going to read y'all one I wrote before that, because I have it right here. And also because of the tattoo. Guadalupe deserves a piece whenever possible. So I wrote this. It's called Serpents Her Skirt. It came out in Latina of, the Journal of Latina Critical Feminism is the name of it. It came out in their 5th issue. And what I've always been fascinated by when it comes to Guadalupe is how, not just the story of Lupisopopi, but the story of how she came to look like what we recognize as Guadalupe. And so the story goes that there was a sacrifice, that many of the deities had to sacrifice themselves in order for the universe to keep going. And that's when Guadalupe lost her head and her limbs, she sacrificed that. And so I wanted to write about something about that moment where she became something that looked what we would recognize as human to becoming what we know. And I love the idea, the fact that when the Spaniards saw her image, they were so frightened they buried her statues. That's awesome. Anyway. So this is Serpents Her Skirt. Live or not live. Die or not die. Die so that everyone lives, so that the darkness will not be eternal, so that the sun rises again. Live so that this is not the end of the story. 4th, 5th, 6th sun, 4th, 5th, 6th world, every world and every sun are precarious. What do you weigh at the end and beginning of time? What is agony and what is sacrifice if your beloved world requires it? What is the body when you are a goddess? When the light of the stars lives in your hands, when the blood roaring from your throat doesn't mean death, when the shattered limbs do not mean helplessness. The body has known pain, the body has known death. This body does not surrender, and so the body accepted agony, and the body birthed agony, birthed itself. Sacrifice of God flesh. It was not a spilling of light but blood and red muscle and white bone and bile and offal and weeping that was more fire than salt. Fountains and geysers and roaring oceans of blood all at once. Head taken, limbs taken, the torso seizing, breasts laid bare, hips convulsing, and the god sex exposed. And time and no time, and before time and after time, all collapse. This is the moment of origin, the moment of choice, when neither the name before or the name after will encompass the story, where the divine and the flesh meet implacable will, because death is the end of effort, the end of pain. To live is infinite work. To survive is infinite struggle. To endure is an infinite cycling of pain. To transform, an infinite act of creation. The body chooses life, and choosing life, fountains of blood become serpents. Seize them, and 2 of their heads shall be your head. 2 identical heads facing each other, infinitesimally close, infinitesimally distant, creating the illusion of one symmetrical serpent face. Transform or die. And now your limbs are gone, also become serpent, also become talon, also become monster. What is monster in the face of the divine? Is not all the divine monster somehow to the human? Do not fear the monster within. The divine made flesh is always monstrous. Breathe. Blood made muscle, fists clenched and relaxed, flesh and stone, face and stone. The heart is never stone. The heart is an infinite volcano of blood. Breathe and the body moves. Breathe and see that the world has not ended, is not ended, will not end. Breathe and see this body reflected and not. Breathe and the serpent mouth, the sibilant serpent tongues whisper, I am the mother of myself first. How many are there? Serpents her skirt, and hearts her skirt, and stars her skirt, and lightning her skirt, and flowers her skirt, and more. All the sisters, all the not sisters, infinite and infinitely reflected. Tears and blood and God flesh and sweat and willing sacrifice, and all the light within, and the choice, and the monstrous, and the breathing, and all the stars, and all the serpents. And this is how the world never ends. So that's my Guadalupe story. Thank you. That's what I figured. Because people keep asking, because I had meant to only write fiction and poetry. And then somehow I ended up writing articles and essays. And then I just wrote a comic book that'll be out in April. And then somebody asked me to write the libretto for an opera. So that's what I'm doing next year. And I've decided that what makes sense is just to think that all of it is poetry. It just might look slightly different on the page. And I might have to collaborate with other people. Might have to, yeah. But yeah, it's all poetry. So now I'll go to what I like doing, which is I'm gonna pick a couple poems. I somehow don't sometimes believe that I have multiple books and that they fill up as much space as they do and that more of them are coming. And it's crazy to think that some of the poems in this collection I wrote in '94. All right, what am I reading? I like to not know. I just open it up. But then I have to agree with it, so. Those are very sad. I guess I'm gonna read a sad poem. Not that one though. That one's a little too crazy. I keep coming back to this one. I guess I'm supposed to read this one. So this is a poem that I wrote for my brother's rose bush. It was in a container pot. And he moved into this real sketchy apartment complex where people would come along, and it's not just that they would steal the roses. It's, you know, because it would be one thing if they had stolen the rose and given it as a gift. But instead it's like they were driven to destroy the flower and like cut up all its petals and like cut the stem and like mess up the leaves and just like leave everything there. So like it would have been better for him if somebody had taken it to give to someone or to take it home. But they would just be destroying it. And he named the rose bush. My brother loved his plants. So this was for his rose bush that was named Clarice. For Clarice. Sometimes you must believe in roses, must sit down with them and tell them they are not dead. They must be convinced that their roots, still green, still viable, will want to burst from the ground. That their leaves are impatiently waiting for the space to unfurl, anxious to feel the sun on their wearied faces, beseeching hands. Light is life, water is song. Face against the earth, call its names. call of the blossoms, still waiting, unborn, dreaming of the murmuring breeze, dreaming of life, however small, vulnerable, in one corner of a garden with rainwater and dew, spiders and butterflies. Sometimes you must sit down with people. Tell them they are not dead. Sometimes holding their green-veined hands and dark leafing gaze, listening to their briared pains, and hurting for the dry summer winds that burned away all their greenness. It is sometimes necessary to say, cling to life. I'm gonna go find something very old. Oh, you know what? Let's do this one. So this one was in an anthology that Carmen Tafoya was one of the editors, and it was in an anthology that got banned in Arizona. I didn't have any books at the time. I didn't have any books at the time to get banned in Arizona because I really wanted that. But I was happy that this poem was in a book that was banned. So I was like, all right, it works. So this one's called Corazón Aztlán. The body has always known its origins, land, languages, gods. Call its names in a running leap of silent screams and the body will answer. Imagínate tu cuerpo, tu historia. Limbs of conquest and civilization, wombs of continent crossing generations, your hands a million laboring days. Begin searching with your fingertips maps of the contouring earth, cling to flesh and limbs, and remember places your eyes have never seen. Follow the blue veins to red organs, where language is known and lost, thunder with stories like the birthing of obsidian, and listen. Try to forget what lives in your bones. Try to silence the voices speaking behind your beating heart. Try to ignore the yearning recognition of islands and sky. Rename your body. Let them count and classify it, studying kidneys, livers, brain, flesh, bones, skin, hair, but written on your intestines, the names of your antepasados. Their dreams seeded corn and fertile lands, waiting. Cuerpo America. Ocean, sky, the tierra itself. You hold rivers and canyons and our place of origin. The trails through your veins, the paths of your hair, everything leading back to your Corazón Aztlán. So I wrote a book that was Blood Sugar Canto, that was all about being diabetic, coming from a family with diabetes, served with multiple generations, the experience of having it, the community, food, doctors, everything. And I usually like to read the most traumatizing and sad pieces. But that's not the mood I'm in right now. So we're gonna read, here we go, we're gonna read the nice poem. This is the only poem that mentions doctors in a nice way. All the other ones cuss them out. Also, if y'all buy this book, there's one doctor in particular that is named. I did not change the name because they were not innocent. So, you ever see that doctor, feel free to kick him. But this is the nice one. Grace. Another examining room. The young physician's assistant walks in and greets me, glances over my file, puts everything down. Let's take a look at your feet to start, she says. I bend down to take off my shoes, but she stops me, kneels down. I apologize for not having had a pedicure for my unpainted toenails. She waves away my apologies and takes my right foot in her hands and carefully removes the shoe, then the sock. She holds my foot carefully and asks me to close my eyes. Do you feel this? She asks. And this? And this? And what about here? And this? Wonderful, she says. You've lost no feeling at all. She releases my right foot and lifts the left one and treats it as gently and respectfully as the first. I want to cry. I want to thank her, but I don't have the words. Years of the doctors turning away while I removed my shoes. Years of them wincing and trying not to touch my skin with their gloved hands. My still strong and sensitive feet made ugly. No one had ever treated my feet this way. It was a gift to be seen as a person who'd known joy and suffered pain. Not the automaton the doctors had poked and prodded. Doctors who never warned me before they hurt me, who never even said it might hurt. Doctors who'd seen me at my most vulnerable and had no human look or touch or word they could spare me. I wanted to cry. This was a gift, as humble and great a gift as if she had washed my feet with her hair. This was a kind of grace, my feet in her hands. How gently she put my socks back on again, how she slipped my shoes back on, how she too saw the beauty of my simple feet. So in this entire book that is almost 100 pages long, there is only one poem that ever makes people laugh. So I'm gonna read that one. And I was inspired by a commercial. In the and I don't even remember what the commercial was for, but in the commercial, there's this guy who's headed to the refrigerator, and he opens up the refrigerator, and he's pulling out all kinds of things: chocolate syrup, whipped cream, cherries, I don't even know what else. And he's headed to join his girlfriend, you know, in their bedroom, and so he's taking all this stuff. And I became indignant because I was like, a diabetic person cannot be taking chocolate syrup and whipped cream and all this other stuff. It's way too much sugar. This is not right. And so then I thought I would write a poem in response to that. So this is called The Diabetic Lover. And I will warn you that yes, it's only funny in one part, okay? The Diabetic Lover. It's not recommended, my love, that I cover your body with whipped cream and chocolate syrup, maraschino cherries for aesthetic emphasis. I could not dust you with enough whey protein to make up for all those empty carbohydrates. I cannot tongue red wine from your body or drink shots out of your navel, since that would make me quite literally sick. But the thought of grilled chicken breast and veggies with half a cup of brown rice served on your skin does not seem conducive to a night of passion. No, for sweetness, all I'd need would be 25 granules of turbinado raw cane sugar. Oh, so carefully counted. One on your left temple, that's where I begin. Dark sweetness exploding against my tongue. Dark sweetness in the scent of your hair. 3 on your tongue, while I pulled on your lower lip with my teeth. 1 along your jaw, 1 down your neck, and 1 on your clavicle. I see sunlight and lush green leaves playing over your skin. 2 on one shoulder, and 3 trailing down diagonally to your hip. I meant to use only my lips, mouth, tongue, but my hands can't resist following the waves of your body, the ocean crashing in my ears. I take 5 in the palm of my hand and rasp them against the tips of your breasts, drink in your gasp, then hunt for every bit of sugarcane dust while you sighed. 3 down your abdomen like far-flung constellations. My mouth on your belly always makes you curl up. I'd catch 1 foot and then the other, place a granule on each arch. Since raw cane sugar doesn't dissolve at the first touch, I'd rolled 1 granule up your calf, another from your knee to your thigh, 1 from your thigh to your hip, and then I'd find my 25 granules gone. But no worries, my love, I'd murmur against the apex of your thighs. Your sweetness always renders any more excessive and unnecessary. The rest of it, depressing. So this book, CUICACALLI House of Song, got published right before the pandemic. And what I had wanted to kind of explore in this book was this idea, you know, we were talking about borders and what we are and what we aren't enough. And one of the things I think that also gets lost is not just in what ways are we American and what ways are we Mexican. The other big part of it is in what ways are we indigenous or not, and how do we claim it or not, and how do other people make us feel about claiming it or not. So I wanted to explore that in this collection. And the poem that started it all, it came to me while I was at a bus stop in Austin. And it was one of those beautiful nights where you see all the stars, and there's this breeze blowing. And I thought about this. It seems to me the stars are endearing. Here where I stand, the ancestors stood. The same wind, the same night sky, the same trees, the same sweet scent of grass. I touch my face, and the hand touching my face is 100 hands deep. We are like lost children who do not know our birth names, do not know our birth mothers, as if we had been taken, as if we had been abandoned, as if we had been raised in a world without mirrors. The world confuses history with truth, victims with survivors, lines on a map for reality. The headlines proclaim us foreign, dangerous, and dark-skinned hordes, invading what has never existed. This is my earth, not theirs. It has always been my earth. Taste it, and my blood and your tongue will confuse the two. The one. This sky and my spirit, also one, the same ardent shade of blue. And this is my face as it has been for 1,000 years, all my mother's faces. I walk the same steps, listening to a half song, dreaming a half song. My voice fashions a half song. But my hands are not half hands. My heart is not a half heart. My blood is not half blood. My soul is not half soul. If I stand, they stand. If I live, they live. If I breathe, they breathe. If I speak, they speak through me. If I heal, they heal through me. I am never alone. I am never only one. I am the embodiment of 1,000 years' desire to survive, to live, to be free. Here where I stand, the ancestors stood. The same wind, the same night sky, the same trees, the same sweet scent of grass. I touch my face, and the hand touching my face is 100 hands deep. It seems to me the stars are endearing. I've been so mellow, let's do an angry one. So, about 6 years ago, my brother and I moved into a second-floor apartment. And he called me, I think, 3 different times. Somebody had climbed onto the second-floor patio and was trying to get in through the door, through the patio sliding door. And my brother had very severe, limited mobility. So he was freaking out, and I was freaking out. And I told the apartment complex, y'all need to put security lights, y'all need to get a security patrol, y'all need to do something. Because if not, one of these nights, I'm gonna be out there with a machete, and I'm gonna cut whatever and whoever comes up. I was pissed. And I have a very short temper, so they did eventually get lights in the security patrol. But I was thinking a lot about how angry I was. And I realized, I think I was at work, I realized that anger wasn't just at the person trying to get in. And so I wrote this. After the 3rd time, the would-be burglar climbed into my second-floor patio and tried the doors. It is night. It is dark here. I am in the shadows where I cannot be seen from the ground, long-bladed machete in hand. I am waiting for those hands, those fingers to grasp at the railing as he hoists his weight up. I will collect my due of blood and scream. I am waiting, and as I wait, it comes to me that I am weary of tears, that we are all weary of tears, that my ancestors and my descendants are weeping, and I can hear them weeping, and I can taste their tears. And this is what we have done, and what we have done, and what we have done, until we are sick with grieving. What has been taken, what is being taken, and what will be taken. I am weary of tears. I want blood. I want an infinite machete extending all directions in time. No one will touch my children or my ancestors with violence. Their blood will never be spilled, will never have been spilled, will not be spilling. No dying now or then or to come. No violence, no injury, no hurt. No woman, no child, no man, no person forced against their will. No patch of earth or water or sky violated or polluted, never violated in the time to come or the time that has passed. My infinite machete swung by my infinite strength, I will make 1,000-layered necklace of severed hands to rest on my infinite chest. Let the fingers and limbs pile up in my wake. I am weary of tears. I am weary of grieving. They will not touch what is not theirs. They will not touch what is not theirs. The earth is screaming and singing through me unleashed. I will collect my due of blood and scream. They will not touch what is not theirs. They will not touch what is not theirs. I will take their hands, their fingers, their hearts, for wanting, for having wanted what is not theirs. Not theirs, not theirs, not theirs, not theirs. These bodies, these histories, these dreams, these families, these lands, these skies, these nations, these people, these freedoms, they are not theirs to take. read poems from the collection that'll be out in January. I wrote this book in 2 months and tortured these two by sending them each poem as I wrote it, just about. So my brother passed away. My brother and my adopted son, they both passed away last summer. And I was so lost, I had to come to poetry to figure out how to put things back together. So that's what this entire collection is. And I had difficulty driving here today because I was trying to figure out what I was gonna wear tonight. I'm wearing my brother's favorite Guayabera. I think the first time he wore it was like 05 or 06. And we had been gifted tickets to a fundraiser for AROHO. I'm sorry, I probably shouldn't have said that because we were miserable at this event. The music, the food, everything was just blah. And so he and I were laughing, even though we were miserable, because we were like, this is what it felt like when we were kids, and they would drag us to a wedding, and it went on for hours and hours. We couldn't leave, and like we were just being tortured by being at this wedding forever. And I was like, that's what it felt like being at this event, but like we wanted to be polite. So after discussing it, we figured that 2 hours was a good, reasonable amount of time. As soon as we hit the 2-hour mark, we said goodbye to people, we took off, and we consoled ourselves by going to IHOP for pancakes, and felt better. Because I was like, yes, you know, we're adults now, we can leave, and we have our own vehicle, and we can go wherever we want. So we were happy, but that's the first time he wore this shirt. And so I saw it this morning when I was trying to figure out what to wear, and I thought I'll wear it tonight. All right, so I'm gonna read 2 from here. Oh, and by the way, this is the cover of the book that's coming, and it's a frontexto that Octavio painted. I'm not quite sure when. Actually, I do remember when. So I thought of the title of this book in October of last year when I was at your house and we had made hibiscus tacos. And I'm one of those people, I like to visualize a project. So almost as soon as I decide to write a book, I figure out what the cover's gonna be. And I had picked a cover, but it was too happy. And then you posted this like 2 weeks after that. And I was so grateful because most of my books have my brother's artwork on them. But I knew that for this book, it couldn't be his artwork because I would not be able to deal. So this frontexto that Octavio made gave me something to focus on while I wrote the book. And I'm very thankful, thank you. I'm paying Octavio Tacos for the use of the image. And so I'm gonna read a couple from here. There's one that I haven't read out loud. I haven't read a lot of these out loud. But I'm gonna do this one because it was actually published yesterday in poemoftheweek.com. All right. In my heart. In my heart, no service. In my heart, no cages. In my heart, no stampedes. In my heart, no whirlpools. In my heart, no quicksand. In my heart, no raging fires. In my heart, no guilt. In my heart, no shame. In my heart, no chaos. In my heart, no bitterness. In my heart, nothing left unsaid. In my heart, tawny fields of tall grass. In my heart, drifting clouds. In my heart, flowering vines. In my heart, mesquites and huizaches. In my heart, sycamores and cedars. In my heart, every small and humble green. In my heart, pluming ocotillos and crowns of thorns. In my heart, the peaceful lapping of the wide river. In my heart, the light of his eyes that will never leave me. In my heart, 1,000 conversations. In my heart, the hand I held, even after it went cold. My friend said, you see, hardly anyone knows what peaceful grief looks like. My mother would say, mis cuerpitos, my dead in the diminutive, claiming all her dead with unfaded, undimmed, unending love and affection. I say when anyone will listen that she taught me how to mourn, as if she knew she would leave me when I was young, as if she knew I would have much to mourn. Or perhaps it was because I was the first child born after her mother died. I don't know the dates. Sometimes I wonder if I floated in tears and not amniotic fluid. She taught me by remembering and remembering her own mother, what her mother loved, how her mother spoke, what her mother believed. And I knew how to mourn my own mother, how it was less pain and more love to remember, to speak all the time of what she loved and what she said and what she taught me. My mother knew no distant way to think of her ancestors or her beloved dead. I think she would have had compassion for those who are awkward in the face of grief, awkward because grief hasn't yet visited them, or because they weren't taught, and they don't know or cannot accept that death is not the opposite of life, only the next part, the next world, the doorway we'll all enter. No one taught me to fear death, and I never learned it on my own. I wonder now, because I spend days, all my days, in contemplation, if this is a form of meditation, this remembering the dead who are gone, but also not gone. To mourn and mourn deeply in all directions and time. I cannot make new memories with mis muertitos, but it crosses my mind all the time. They would have loved this. This would have made them laugh, and this would have made them weep. As fiercely as I might laugh or live, what do I call this new way of walking? This sense that every other step is in the next world, not this one. It isn't that they are with me, it's that part of me is already with them. I was gonna try not to read this poem, but apparently it wants me to read it. So as I've told many people, I believe that every book has a heart poem. It's the poem around which the rest of the book is built. And sometimes it's the hardest poem to write. So as well as being a heart poem, it's also the hard poem. But once it's written, I know I can write the rest of it. So this is the heart poem and the hardest poem in this collection. I had to write a poem because after he passed, and he lived with me for almost 20 years. He died at age 40. People kept telling me, well, you know, he's still with you, he's still with you. And I thought, I don't want you to say that. I don't want him to be with me. I want him to be free. All right, so I'm gonna read this. Many years ago, like, 10 years ago, I was invited to read it at Rice. And the professor who introduced me said what I think is one of the most important things that anybody's ever told me. He's introduced my work as being an invitation to cry. And I thought, okay, I can live in that. I grew up in a home where nobody ever cried and nobody ever said I love you or any of these things. And my brother and I, we gave each other permission to cry all the time. We cried over commercials, movies, songs, events. We cried because we were hungry. We cried whenever we wanted. And it was lovely permission that we gave each other. So I'm okay with sharing tears. I know some people feel like it's a lot. I'm okay with it. I can fix my face later. So don't worry about me, I'm good. I know they mean well when they say my brother is still with me. But I hope he isn't. In his last days, he was forgetting where he was and my name and his own name. He was forgetting all of it, and he knew only enough to trust my voice and my hand holding his hand, and that he wasn't alone, and that I would take care of anything he needed. I hope he's walked on to the next world without any memory of this one. Hope he's forgotten all the pain, all the anger. I hope he's forgotten his childhood and my father, forgotten bullies and homophobes, forgotten bruises and broken hearts, forgotten despair and hurt. I hope he's forgotten doctors and painkillers and surgeries and hospitals and wounds and pain. Oh, I hope he's forgotten pain. Even if it means he's forgotten me, even if our difficult years and our beautiful years live only in my heart, even if he doesn't remember all our adventures, all our tears, all our laughter, even if he doesn't remember our years of colors and words and music and flowers, because even when he didn't know my name, he still smiled at me and looked so kindly upon me, and I couldn't have prayed for anything more at his peaceful moment of passing. I hope he remembers nothing, even if it means I send all this love that still lives in me out in no particular direction. In the first rain afterwards, I saw him in the white rain lilies sprouting roadside, saw him in the greening of the revived blades of grass, saw him when the leaves started to change color, and I saw him when the crimson crown of thorns started blooming. May his spirit be racing in delight from one streak of lightning to another. May it be curled in comfort in the petals of roses and peonies. May it be watching in wide-eyed delight as the dew forms each morning. May his spirit be drifting in the soft clouds overhead. May he be visiting the snow-covered choyas blooming in soft yellow. May his spirit be running with the howling of the coyotes I heard tonight and last night and the night before. I had a friend, Ire'ne Lara Silva, who, I guess when I met her, she was almost 70. I was 25 or so. And whenever she would go up to read poems, at the bookstore in Austin, her hand would shake and her voice would tremble and she would start crying. She had a lot of poems that had to do with growing up in New Mexico, and her mother had committed suicide in front of her with a shotgun when she was 11. So she had a lot of painful poems to write and to express. And every time that she got up and she'd start, crying or shaking or whatever, somebody would always volunteer, would always volunteer from the audience to hold the poem for her or to read it for her or to tell her that she didn't need to read it. And she would smack them away and she would tell them, I'm giving you something real. This is how this makes me feel. And so ever since then, like for the last, what's it been now? I don't know, many years now, 25 years or so, that's what I think. It's one of the things that I look for when I look at what poetry I want to read. Is give me the real thing. It's a gift we give each other. So for those of you, I heard some sobbing too coming from the audience. I thank you too for your tears. Thank you. Okay, so deep breath. And if anybody has any burning, urgent questions, and they better be good questions. If they're bad ones, we're not going to take them. Yes. All right, so burning, urgent, good questions for anybody up here or for all of us. Anybody have good ones, go for it.
And also to let you know, because we have a beautiful donation from the charity ball, we were able to get technology. And so now we have a wireless microphone to pass around the audience if anyone has questions.
We're gonna have a minimum of 3 questions. Otherwise, everybody owes us $20. So, somebody better volunteer for the sake of everybody else, because I count at least like $600 in here. Did somebody throw the students under the bus? Is that what I heard? Okay.
Okay, so, you're all from South Texas. I'm from South Texas. It's the best place in the universe. And all of your work is so magical. I just want you to comment on your that home, that space, and talk about it, how it exists in your work, because I just want to hear more about what you do all the time.
You want this? Let's have another one here. talking, so it's one of y'all's turn.
Can you all hear me? About space?
The RGB.
Well, my first book is all about the borderlands. The second book is more about an emotional geography. But I mean, I feel like I don't go into a poem writing about the Rio Grande Valley, for example, but I know everything that I am is somehow found there.
Yeah. Thank you.
You want to say something?
Yeah, I think when I first really got into writing, especially with poetry and like young adult fiction, I would never was like, okay, it's gonna be based on the valley or it's gonna be in there, but it's just such an identity within all of us that are from there that no matter what we create, it's somehow in there. And then I think over time, realizing and identifying that and really expanding on that and allowing it to live in our writing.
Hello. Oh, it works.
I'm actually from a border town. So my from Del Rio. Anybody knows Del Rio?
Yeah.
And I am several generations Tejana. And so a lot of my poetry speaks to the trauma of the borderlands, you know, the different ideologies, colonial ideologies that sort of act against the female body and the voice. Thank you.
We didn't mean for you to feel excluded because you're not from the Rio Grande Valley. We accept you.
Still not
I don't know, is it 956?
It did say South Texas. Yeah, you did.
You know, I was thinking of that this morning coming over here driving down to San Antonio. I was like, I'm so 956 that I remember when it was 210. I'm so 956, I remember when it was 512. Like, really? I remember my childhood phone that was 512-313-4785. You know? But yeah, that's you too, Eddie. See, another South Texas person. But what was I gonna say? Oh, so yes, I agree with what Gume said. I was trying to explain to somebody that, you know, I've lived in Austin for the last 25 years. I qualify that. I've mostly lived in Austin. San Antonio has been my escape hatch for 25 years. So even though I've never lived here, I give people directions, I recommend restaurants, I tell people where to go all the time. But like, it didn't matter that I moved to Austin. In fact, it didn't even matter during the years that I lived in upstate New York. You know, you live on the border lives in you, you take it everywhere you go. And then you see, you know, gente Latina or Indígena anywhere. And so the border keeps rebirthing or reenacting itself everywhere. And so I'm like, I tell people I live on the border and they're like, and where do you live? I'm like, I live in Austin. And they're like, that's on the border. Yes, it is. All of Texas is a border. Most of the US is a border. You know, I think when I went to college, there was a Chicano who was from Alaska. I was like, Alaska's the border too. So yeah. Question number 2. 20 bucks on the pocket.
Growing up in the valley, was it ever hard to talk about living in the valley in your poems? Was it hard to I guess put it into your poems because the valley, there is that like sense that you're trapped, and like once you settle, you cannot leave. So I think it is hard to talk about it. And how has it been hard for you to talk about it, Allie?
Okay, I'm gonna jump in even though I just answered the question. That's because I have one of my favorite stories to tell. So I decided to write a story. It takes the Pledge of Allegiance, and in between the Pledge of Allegiance, it talks about going to elementary school in the valley, and all the ways that it was bad. My parents were migrant farm workers and truck drivers, and so we changed schools sometimes 3, 6, 7 times a year. And it was always assumed that I was going to need, you know, remedial whatever. So I had to fight from like when I was a kid to get put into the right classes. And so I wanted to put all of that in a poem. And so I wrote this poem about that. So I read it at a protest in upstate New York when I was in college. I was 19. And there was a woman, a young woman, a classmate, that was right in front of me at this protest. And she hated my guts. In fact, I'm pretty sure she still hates my guts, like 30 years later. She could not stand me for nothing. I just annoyed, I don't know, whatever. She hated me. But I read this poem about being in the Valle and about the fact that our elementary school, they used to divide, when people were gonna have lunch, you'd get a token in the morning. So if you paid for your lunch, you got a white token. And if you paid like the halfway price, you got a red token. And if you got a free lunch, it was a blue token. And so you had to carry it around all morning long. And then when you turned it in before you got your lunch tray, everybody would see what color token you had. And of course, there was a crap load of blue tokens in the valley. But still, it was a shameful thing. Like, it shouldn't have been, because so many of us needed them, but it was shameful. So anyway, so the poem's called Blue Tokens, and it does all that. And so I read that poem at this, because we were protesting about education and needing Latino studies and things like that. And so this woman who hated me was in front of me, and I read the poem. She was crying by the end of the poem. And I thought, yes. Not just because I didn't like her and she didn't like me, but because I was like, I think I said what I needed to say in this poem, to talk about how difficult it was to grow up poor and Spanish speaking and dark skinned in a place where all of those things are everywhere, and it shouldn't have been a source of shame. But I think it was also a really important lesson at 19 to see how powerful a poem speaking the truth of experience could be.
Yeah, and I know what you mean by like that feeling of being trapped when you're from there. And I think for all of us, when you grow up there, it's either you have the mindset, I'm going to be here for the rest of my life till I die, or I can't wait to get out of here. And I think for a lot of my life growing up, I was just like, I guess I'm just going to always be from here. And it wasn't until a year or two after I graduated high school when I was like, it switched in my brain. It's like, I need to get out of here. And I moved around the country a lot through my 20s. I'm 36 now, but I was like all around the country. And it was weird because I feel the further I got, the closer I felt to the valley. The last place I lived that was outside of Texas was in Milwaukee. And it was really weird because I'd go to like thrift stores or antique shops, and they had a bunch of valley memorabilia because I'd never thought about it, but that's where all the Winter Texans are from. And so you talk to people, everybody knows like, oh yeah, Mission, oh yeah, FAR. And it's like, what? Like, people in San Antonio don't know those cities. And so it's interesting because like, you just can't escape it. It's like, it's part of you, but I think that incorporating into writing, it also, you go through that stage also, it's like, who am I to say anything about it? But it's just affirming yourself in your own identity as somebody from the valley, as somebody who's from the borderlands, realizing, like that is your identity, so you do have a voice to talk about and write about.
I never felt trapped in the valley, to be honest. I always knew that. Let me rephrase that. I don't know, I guess I read a lot, and I was always in conversation with characters that I wrote about, so I never felt that entrapment that is very, I don't know, it's just like a cliche, because anybody who grows up in small towns, we all want to get out of there, And the valley even has a bad rep for that. And you see it in the literature too. William S. Burroughs, who lived there in far Texas, he writes in a book, the valley is the place where the dying cell gravitates to die, or something like that. So all that's, in the literature, and also in just the mentality of some people, but I never felt that way. As a matter of fact, I feel that the valley to me is like, now that I don't live there, but I'm close by, I feel like it's like it's its own beautiful little country that you really have to have experienced it in the way that some of us have to really see the beauty of it. And now that I've moved out, I can actually write about it in a more reflective way. I don't know who it us and said that in order, if you want to write about your own country, you need to leave your own country to write about it. So I feel like I just left, crossed the border at the, what's it called?
At the checkpoint?
Yeah, at the checkpoint. And now I'm in another country where I'm writing about a country that I love.
And I think Gonzaldúa wrote Borderlands when she was living in New York State. So it's an interesting thing to think of. Yeah, I just want to clarify, it's not necessarily the Valle that chased me away, it was wanting to get away from my family. Like, I actually love Miami because it reminds me so much of the Valle. Palm trees and the ratas, a lot more water, it's colder, it's greener, and none of my family live there. So I'm just trying to fight it with Miami in a little bit.
So while I'm from a border town, I actually didn't move there till I was nearly 10 years old. And before that, I lived in California. However, we came back to Texas because that's where we're from. And writing about land for me is very traumatic because there is a long history of land displacement in my family, beginning with my indigenous background. So, and I'm still actually working toward being able to write more about my connection to the land. It's a really good question, thank you.
All right, one more question, or still everybody else is talking about? Let's let Norma ask. And if your question is burning and urgent, we'll let you ask also. Okay.
Speaking of the valley, it reminded me, of course, of the language of the valley. And the question or a comment really is how beautiful all of your poetry is. And if you wanted to say a few words about how you negotiate that Spanglish and the Spanish and the English and all the different levels of language that Alzambla talks about in your own work and then just in your lives.
I'm gonna give the stupid answer. So, I don't know how many years ago, 4 years ago. Octavio was in Austin, and we all went with some people afterwards and had tacos and margaritas and whatever else. And everybody was speaking Spanish, and I can usually hold my own. I get a little freaked out if it's academic Spanish or people with money. If it's working class people or we're drunk, I'm good. But so we were having some debate about poetry and pornography and I don't remember what else. And I had no idea what I was trying to say, but I was trying to say it in Spanish while I couldn't figure out what I was on. And Octavio finally broke down and he's like, just say it in English. What do you mean? And I was thinking, I don't even know what I want to say in English. So it doesn't matter which language. I have no idea what I'm saying. And it took me a while to formulate the thought. But it's interesting to think of how not the strangeness, how that particular language seeds in us. I remember my father yelling because my parents only spoke Spanish. They were born here, but they only spoke Spanish. And I think that's something that we also don't talk about, how many generations of people born in Texas, Spanish is their primary language. And my father would always yell all the time, si no hablan español, voy a mandar a Mexico. Aprendan a hablar español. And he's like, I'm just gonna send all of you to Mexico so you can learn how to speak Spanish. And we'd be like, send us, please. Because my dad hated to see anybody doing nothing. So we worked from the moment we woke up until we said, you can go take a bath. And we'd be like, thank you, But, so when I went to upstate New York, then I was around Mexicans a lot, because there was a lot of them there. And I learned all these words and whatever else, and I came back to the Valle, I think, for Christmas. And I'm listening to my parents talk, and I'm like, they're not talking Mexican Spanish. They're talking Texan Spanish. And so I would bring out some of the fancy words I learned, and they look at me like, what on earth are you saying? And I remember my sister and I and my mother were crossing over to Progreso, and the officer there was like, habla la cajuela. And my sister's like, because we learned Castaña. So she's like, habla la cajuela. And she was just freaking out, and my mother's looking at her, and I'm looking at her, and we're like, the truck. So finally we got through the border. But anyway, but yes, it was that realization of that even them thinking they were speaking Spanish. And even though my mother identified us as, all born in the US, but she would say we were Mexicanos de este lado. As if to say, we're all Mexicanos, just some are on that side, some are on this side, all Mexicanos. But it's to learn that all those seeds came from that time, from those experiences, that it's not just us being clever or playing with language or wanting to put in like a decorative amount of Spanish to like be more Latino. That is lo que nos nace, you know? So I'm always interested sometimes to hear what will come out of my mouth when I'm talking to people, because when I'm most comfortable, I don't speak all English or Spanish. I speak a mix of both. And that's me relaxed. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's funny because I had mentioned how I have those 2 verse novels coming out next year, the Samson and the Wingle, and the other one, and they're both set in the valley. And so the dialogue that they have, it's a lot of valley like Spanglish. And so you know, whenever you have your book, you send the manuscript to the editor, they go through all of it, and then they send it back with you know, changes and like remarks on it and comments. And so for a lot of the Spanish words, she was like, we can't figure out what this word means. Like her and like the Spanish speaking editor. Yeah, they're like, we checked on Google, we checked all the dictionaries, like, what is this word? Is it spelled? No. They thought I was misspelling Spanish words, like, Iguazu. They were like, what is that? And I think I posted on Facebook too. Yeah, I posted to Facebook, like, so how do y'all define this? I asked my friends on Facebook. There's like dozens of different answers. Like and it's funny because depending on which part of the valley you're from,
and
what
how
part
old
of Texas,
you are.
yeah, age played a huge factor. And so it's interesting how for me it was a wake up call, like, oh wow, the uniqueness of the language there in the borderlands.
I love it. No, I think I'm from the Rio Grande Valley, so it's really easy for me to go back and forth in Spanish from people from here until you start talking to people from Mexico. Like some of my family's from Monterrey, so when they come over here, and I found this out. I mean, I knew about it, but I kind of confirmed it this past weekend. 3 of my cousins from Monterrey came, and we went on a road trip to see Metallica. And I realized that it was really hard for me to joke around with them. Like, I always felt myself stumbling. Like, the words that I knew they didn't know, and some of the stuff they were saying I didn't know. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like slang. So, but right now I think I'm more interested in learning I guess the more formal Spanish. And I've been, those of you who are on social media, I've been writing some poems, short poems, where I go from English into Spanish, and I'm really trying to figure out how to do it without sounding gimmicky.
So, about 5 years ago, I started to collaborate with the city immigration liaison, organizing big poetry events centered around human rights. And we invited newcomer artists from around the world. And you know, it was one of the first times that I encouraged them, you read the poetry of your heart. And they were like, nobody wants to hear Arabic, or nobody wants to hear Farsi or Persian. And we're like, we want to hear it, we need to hear it. And so what initially we started doing was, we started to, within those poets, we brought in local poets. There's a lot of local poets here who have been a part of this. And what they did is they carried the theme of the poetry across the art, across the narrative, using English and of course Spanish, right? And what ended up happening was really beautiful, because at the end of everything, everybody understood what was being said in the poetry. We would tell everybody, look at the expressions, the gestures, the fully embodied experience of the poetry. And so I was finishing up my master's, and all of a sudden I heard this translanguaging term. And I was like, that's what we do, we translanguage. And I became more interested. And because of that, I started my PhD. And it had never occurred to me that I live in that space of translanguaging. Most of us do, right? The English, it never occurred to me that in my home where English and Spanish was spoken, that we were translanguaging, And so, so that is now my area of study. However, recently, I was challenged, and I was asked to submit a chapter for a book about decolonizing academic writing through translanguaging. And I thought I would write about my experience, and one of the editors said, nope, that's not what we want. It's time for you to walk the walk. We want to see what you're going to do with your translanguaging in your poetry, in your academic spaces. And so through a poetry autoethnographic study I started over the summer, I realized that I have a tremendous amount of trauma related to how I language. And so that's kind of where I'm at right now. And in fact, for the Mouthfeel anthology, I did use translanguaging, and it's tricky. Like Octavio says, it can't sound gimmicky, right? And so on top of making it mesh well, you also need it to match your poetics. You don't want to disrupt your poetry, the way that you language and voice your poetry. So that was a really good question, Dr. Cantu. Thank you so much.
All right, so before we all hit refreshments, does anyone have a burning, urgent question that you absolutely must ask tonight while we are all here, because who knows what's going to happen tomorrow? Erica, do you want to ask?
It wasn't burning.
It wasn't burning. I want burning. Burning. Okay, I don't know where the mic is. Mandy. Wait, go ahead and she can project, but let her have the mic.
I have a burning question for you, young man, about your hopes and dreams for Texas Poet Laureate and your possible hesitations or discomforts. Mostly hopes and dreams.
So, Octavio knows this very well, because I feel like I can tell Octavio about all my rages, and I rage a lot. And Octavio's the person that calms me down before I hit somebody. So, so interestingly, after I was very happy with being named Poet Laureate, I thought, how many people can I piss off being Poet Laureate? And so that's kind of what I want to do next year, because I wasn't given any warning. I had no time to plan things, and I like to plan things well. Very recently I was like, I am not half-assing things anymore. Whole ass or nothing, So the plan is, so first, anybody who knows people at HEB, I need them to work with me, not sponsor me. I need them to partner with me. So, but there's 3 big readings that I want to do next year, and then I want to do an HEB program. But what I'm starting to lay the foundation work for is one, because it's somebody asked me a question about what does it mean, being Texas Poet Laureate and being an ambassador in a way for your state. And I thought, well, for me, it's very important that people not think that Texas is only its headlines. That we acknowledge that other people live here, and that we're not crazy for living here because we love it here. And we have communities here, and there's people resisting and struggling and creating and living and having beautiful lives. But we also, need to show that we're here. So I want to do 3 big readings. The first one, to be in support of LGBT people. And I've already got Richard Blanco on board. So we're gonna end okay, I can't name people that I haven't asked yet, but there's other people that I really, really want to be on this too. So one, and then I'm gonna try to make it as big as possible. And then I was just talking to Emmy Bettis about doing one for the border and human rights.
Yes.
And then the third one, I believe the last day of my being Poet Laureate for this year will be the 2nd anniversary of the shooting in Uvalde. So I would like to do a reading in Uvalde that is also about banning assault weapons. So those are the big plans for that. I have other little plans. I also want to get the Austin Public Library, which if y'all haven't been, it's a beautiful building, they don't really do anything for writers with new books. So I want to have like a Texas State Poet Laureate Presents kind of program for the whole year, where at least every other month there'd be a reading, and it would be, this is what this is. And then the program with HEB, and I'm telling everybody because I'm going to make this happen. I proposed this before the pandemic. After I wrote the book that had to do with diabetes, I kept thinking about when my dad learned that he was diabetic in 1986. all the books that he was given talked about food that he should eat, and none of it was culturally relevant at all. And so what I would like to do is to partner with HEB, do multiple readings in multiple towns, make it like a festival, have music, have poetry, but also have like, you know, recipes being demonstrated, the recipes from like Decolonize Your Diet, things that are indigenous, that are, you know, our ancestors' food. And then also it wouldn't just be for Mexicanos, Chicanos, or Latinos, but also people that are interested in gluten-free or, you know, in more natural things, that we could have all of that. And I love HEB because, you know, we all love HEB, but I love HEB especially because I've always appreciated how bicultural they are and how they're so open to that. They're so, I mean, they're here, they don't exist in Dallas, they don't exist in El Paso, but they exist in Mexico. So it's like we already have a natural bridges, you know, these ways. So why not take what they already have? But I don't want them to sponsor me and just like give me some food or some money. I want them to partner with me. So if y'all see HEB people, like you run into them in the street, whatever else, tell them I'm looking for them, okay? But yes, so those are my hopes and dreams for the time that I'm a Poet Laureate.
So on behalf of Gemini Ink, thank you all so much for being here. We packed this room with 56 people. That's pretty awesome. So we are going to now turn up the music, and Ire'ne has books for sale, and so does Jen. So please come visit our authors, talk with them, and mix and mingle your way out the door and take your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mandy.